You should subscribe to the Minaris Club. Because the Prince of All Saiyans told you to, idiot. Bye.
Yo, what's up guys? This is James recording another video for you, MinarisClubYouTube.com. Doing a little something different today. Just decided to make a tier list in Tier Maker. I've been making these sort of just personally for in-house for our group for the last couple of formats since I found out that you can make these on Tier Maker and it's really easy. And I decided to share my thoughts for the upcoming Set 10 format because I've been grinding a little on Untap and just trying to get things figured out there. And I think the format's going to be in a very interesting place, and I really like discussing tiers in any game, really, not just in Dragon Ball. But it's just a fun little way to kind of categorize things and whatnot. So this is just going to be like my opinion, man. So take it with a grain of salt. I'm not a pro or anything. This is just kind of how I feel about the format going into Set 10. So I'll start with the easy stuff. S tier. We got Vegex. No one's arguing about Vegex. He is what he is. He's going to be the defining deck this format, most likely, because he's going to be the deck where you have to ask yourself, okay, what is my plan against Vegex? Because you have to be able to handle Vegex to be able to place in a tournament in this next format. Next up, we have Gotenks. So this could be one of either Gotenks, Toppo, or Sin Shenron, I think. I have the Toppo and Sin Shenron down one tier lower. This is kind of a spot holder for any of those three yellow leaders. This is just kind of a yellow deck. There's going to be a top tier mono yellow deck. I don't know what the best leader is for it just yet. They're all pretty much the same in my eyes. Like, yeah, they get to play some slightly different engines, but for the most part, the decks play the same. So there's going to be a mono yellow deck up here. Gotenks is just the one I'm the most inclined to say is going to pull ahead of the pack, but who knows? Maybe Toppo or Sin Shenron will surprise us. Then we have Dredge Goku. I don't remember his actual name, but we're all just calling him Dredge Goku at this point. This is, again, kind of a tough decision between him and Frieza. It's just kind of a green deck is going to be up here. Dredge Goku is just a slightly better... He's less of a hand control deck and more just a slow, grindy slog deck that just gets value over and over and is going to win the late game. If the game goes long enough, this deck's going to win, most likely. So it could be him or Frieza. One of them will probably pull ahead of the other. I'm not sure which, but I'm inclined to say Dredge Goku at this point, just because he's a little more flexible and I think a little more degenerate overall. So yeah, I'll put him up there. And we have Invoker Goku. He's, this deck's going to be nuts next format. The 3-drop super rare that lets you get out your stuff a turn earlier and reuse your burn cards is just absolutely insane. This is the deck I've been playing the most this format. I think he's definitely ahead of the pack as far as the other Invoker decks go. Android 17 I messed around with a lot. I really wanted to make him work. He's solid. I just think if you're going to be bringing an Invoker deck to like a large competitive tournament, you're not doing yourself any favors by registering Android 17 instead of Goku. Being able to awaken on demand is insane. The peeling away a card from the hand is insane. The self-awaken, not having to rely on your opponent or specific cards to awaken yourself, unlike Android 17. Insane. He's just ahead of Android 17, I think. Not to say Android 17 doesn't have his strengths as well. I really like him as a leader, but I think Goku is still ahead of him in terms of that. Then we have SS3 reboot here. This is another one where it's going to be SS3, Soul Striker reboot, or Vegito. It's going to be one of these mono blue decks. They're all, again, pretty much the same in my eyes. They all play pretty similarly. It's kind of like the yellow decks. It's going to be a blue deck. I don't know which one is going to pull ahead of the pack, but my inclination is going to be SS3, just because I've seen more fleshed out builds with him, and, they're really strong. So he's just got some issues against hand control, which is going to be popular this format, but he also has... People have been figuring out ways to get around that, so... And then lastly, in S tier, we have Gohan reboot. Some people might say he's just A tier now. I have a hard time putting him in A tier. rather not in S tier, just because he can still kill you so quick. Like, you don't draw the right cards, he just kills you. Doesn't matter how well you know the matchup. If you don't draw well, he's going to kill you, and a good player is going to kill you even more consistently because they know what they're doing. So he's up here. He does struggle a little bit against Vegex, but he is the de facto quote go tall aggro compared to Vegex's go wide. So they're both going to be quite relevant in this format, I think. And I think you're crazy if you're sleeping on this leader still. Moving now to A, I've got Hatch. Hatch is one that's in contention for S, but I just haven't seen enough of him performing to really say he qualifies for S. His ability is nuts. Like, his ability is always going to be relevant and always going to put him in contention for S or A tier. He's always going to be floating around these two tiers. It's just a matter of how he lines up with the rest of the format. Obviously, he does well against Vegex. Not quite as well against, like, the other grindier decks and the alt-win-con decks like Gohan, Dredgeku, Invoker. So that kind of drops him down a peg, but he's, still really good, and getting the Power Ranger support is really good for him too. Helps take care of Unisons and all that. Hatch is definitely one I could see an argument for being an S, but my gut reaction right now is to put him in A. Same goes for Jiren. His ability is also insane. He's so unique and powerful in what he's able to do that I used to have him up in S before all the new leaders dropped. I think he's kind of flattened out to A, but he also has some really, really good matchups across the S tier, so he's definitely could be S tier contention. That's just my inkling to put him in A. I've got Janemba in A. A lot of people might say I'm crazy for doing that. Don't have my head. He's really bad this format. Don't get me wrong. He's really bad against Vegex. He's really bad against all the hand control decks. He's not especially good against Invoker, but he's kind of in the same vein as Jiren and Hatch, where his ability is incredibly unique and incredibly powerful. He's definitely he's not going to be the pick this format at all, but I still want to keep him in A tier because he is relevant still, I think. If that makes sense. He's not really relevant this format, but I still think he's A tier worthy, if that makes sense. Like, if you brought him to a table against any of these decks in A tier, he'd do pretty well against almost all of them. He could hold his own. It's just a lot of these S tier matchups that kind of help keep him down here. Then we have Hand Control Frieza. Again, this could be S and swap with Dredgeku, but I'm inclined to say Dredgeku is the more powerful green leader right now. And then again, these Toppo and Sin Shenron, the same thing, but for yellow. Then I have Surge Cell, Surge Broly, and Surge Goku. All the other Surge guys that aren't Piccolo and Kefla, rest in peace Piccolo. Their Surge is still an insane Awaken ability. Getting to Awaken whenever you want is insane. All three of these leaders are still great. Even after the errata, Goku is still great. He filters a ton. He just has to be more aggressive at closing the game because he doesn't get the insane defensive ability. She's still definitely an A tier leader, though, in my opinion. Broly could be up in S tier. I've seen people arguing him for S tier. I could see it. A lot of these top line here I can see in S tier. Same with Cell. I think they're both just held back a little bit compared to some of the leaders I have up in S, but they're both top A for sure. Android 17 I already mentioned. He's still really good. Invoker's still going to be a really good strategy, and he does have his own strengths as opposed to the Goku leader. Getting access to Zeno Unison is really good. And his two abilities on the back are also really good, and his filter on the front is also really good. I think people are sleeping on him, but I still think again, you're not doing yourself any favors by registering him over Goku in a large tournament. Going down the list here, we got set 1 Golden Frieza. This guy just keeps getting better and better. He got even more cards in set 10. And there's a ton of ways to build him. He keeps just getting more and more cards. The leader itself is incredibly strong. He's just a solid A tier deck at this point, I think. I don't know if anyone could argue that. Toa getting a bunch of new support. She's back up here in A. I don't think she ever really left, but she's definitely, it's hard to argue she's not A now with all the new support. She just struggles a little bit against some of these higher tier decks, but yeah, she's really, really strong. She's making a comeback. And she's going to be really good. Yamcha is... So I don't love red this format, for the most part. As you can see, I don't have any red leaders in S other than the multicolor Invoker, which you can't really argue is a red leader. But I think Yamcha is going to be the best red leader in the set going forward for like your kind of just like generic red deck, like kind of like a pan type situation. I think Yamcha is going to be the way to go for that. He's solid, really strong. He can compete with the best of them. He just has some issues against some of the bigger names in the format. We've got Zamasu. This guy was high B for a long time, and the set support he gets this set, I think, bumps him up to A. He's incredibly strong. He's a little underexplored, I think, but there's some diehard players for him, and he's definitely gonna stick around, I think, for a while. He's incredibly strong. Baby, I think people kind of dropped Baby just because the Gohan reboot came out, and then people kind of dropped Gohan reboot for Vegex. People just kind of seem to, as far as like aggro players go, just kind of drop it for whatever the new aggro deck is, which is, not a terrible strat, because people, a lot of the times aggro will get people when they're unfamiliar with the matchup, right? But I still don't think that's a reason to put Baby any lower than A. He's really good, and he has a solid pivot from aggro to mid-range, depending on the matchup he's in. Really hard not to argue him to still be an A, and he's getting new support in the champ pack with the Baby Janemba, which is a super strong card for him. I think he's a solid A. Same goes with Boo. Boo's just kind of like, he's here, he's strong, he's just not as strong as Vegex. So Vegex just kind of does what Boo wants to do, but better most of the time. However, Boo also has kind of that strong pivot where he can be really grindy as well. You can't outgrind him. He's always going to have 5 cards in his hand, so he's really good against all these hand control decks. So Boo's definitely still up here in A. It's just a little bit. He's just not S because Vegex exists. Is kind of my rationale. Trader Dende was high B, I think, for a little while, and then I think it's A now with all the new Frieza support. He's incredibly good. He just has some issues against the faster aggro decks, but he can hold his own. Beerus is up here in A. I would have definitely put him in B before the Goku nerf, because before he was generally just kind of a worse Goku, but now he actually has now that Goku's been nerfed a little bit, there's a little bit more reason to look at Beerus, and Beerus got a big boost out of the Unison abilities as well. He's really good with the Gotenks from the expansion, because the Gotenks helps you get self-awakened without attacking, because that was always one of Beerus' strengths, as he's one of those leaders that can get card advantage without having to be turned sideways, and then he always just kind of had issues with self-awakening, and that Unison helps him with that, and he just can kind of sit back and do control-y mid-range Beerus stuff. So yeah, he's still a contender for sure. He just a lot of the value decks like him and Toa and some of the other decks that just kind of revolve around getting really good value get kind of outclassed by their biggest issue is going to be when they run into Dredgeku, because you cannot outvalue that deck at all. Like, it's going to grind you forever, and it's going to win unless you deck it out somehow, but generally they can close and burn you out with a Bad Omen and stuff before that. So that's kind of Beerus's biggest Achilles heel right now is the really, really good graveyard stuff you can be doing right now. Then I've got the 2 blue guys down here. Again, they could take SS3 spot up in the top. It's just a matter of which one of these is going to pull ahead. They're all still A tier worthy at the very least. Moving down to the dregs at the bottom of the barrel, we've got Lord Slug and we have Android 13. 2 sides of the same hand control coin. Slug's a little bit more consistent. Android 13's a lot more aggressive and can be more explosive. I think they're both about the same right now. They just can be built slightly differently. I just have them down in B because I think they're generally a worse hand control deck than Frieza. I think the Frieza leader is just a little bit more powerful, has a little bit better support, and is more consistent, and has a better matchup against the metagame. Whereas these guys are still solid. Like, I still consider B tier, tournament worthy. I wouldn't be embarrassed to register a B tier deck for a tournament. I think they're all reasonable. But yeah, that's they're just kind of worse hand control decks than Frieza, and then I think Frieza's just kind of worse than Dredgeku is kind of my rationale for where I have these guys. Then that same vein works with this Vegeta. You can use him as an invoker strategy. Eggman did a video on him not too long ago. And yeah, you can just do Mono Blue Invoker stuff and take advantage of the same things you can with Android 17. I personally think the Vegeta leader is slightly worse than Android 17 because I think his utility isn't quite as good. You could flip-flop either of these, either of these Invoker guys, but they're still going to be worse than the Goku Surge leader, I think. Red Baby, I think is just slightly worse than his brother Yellow Baby, but you can play both with the same kind of strategy, and they're both solid. I just think he's a tier lower than his yellow brother, but you do get, red exclusives are also pretty good sometimes. So, Shenron, How the Mighty Have Fallen. I used to consider this S tier, then he got nerfed, then I bumped him down to A tier, then he got nerfed again, and between that and all the stuff in the metagame, he can really suffer. He can be a real dog to some of the other decks in the meta. However, his draw engine's still insane. He's still insanely consistent. Being able to turn anything into a win condition is insane. He's super flexible in how you build him as well. He can be built in so many different ways that I think he's still a B tier. I think he's still competitive and playable. He's just, it's just not quite the right way to be. If you're going to be registering for a big event, I just wouldn't. As much as I love Shenron, I just don't think he's the pick right now, but he's still playable. Same goes with Vanilla Goku. He's still solid, really, really strong. He gets really flexible. He gets a ton of flex slots, so you can play, kind of any color combo you want with him. Either it's multicolor or a monocolor of some sort, or I've even seen mono black builds with him in the Catopezlas. So Kid Q's still around. I think people are kind of were sleeping on him. He just kind of moved on from him, but kind of into Toa. And then Toa kind of fell off, and people kind of fell off of these kind of value-oriented decks. But Vanilla Q can still get there. He's a solid guy. Same with Pan. Again, I just think Pan or Yamcha could have either of their positions switched here. My inclination is to call Yamcha a little better. But Pan's still really good. Cooler is also kind of in this vein of red decks. He's not as good at Mill as Janemba, even though Mill's not really where you want to be right now. And he's not as good at aggro as some of the other decks. He's kind of in the middle, but he's solid. Zamasu, I think he's just worse than his older brother Zamasu, but he can be fine. Ginyu is this kind of, as far as I can tell, he's a little bit one-dimensional as far as aggro goes. His aggro can be really effective, but he doesn't quite have that pivot that some of these aggro decks I have up in A tier and S tier have. He doesn't have the explosive power of Vegex and Gohan, and he doesn't have the pivot power of Baby and Boo, so I've got him down here as kind of a third string aggro deck. Same goes with the Universe 6 leader I have down here as well. Yeah, they can I guess not Gogeta, he's different, and Demigra. So all three of these are just kind of like third string aggro decks. They're still solid. They still do what they do pretty well. I just don't really see a reason to register them over one of these higher tier decks other than for personal preference or whatever. Broly, Evil Unleashed, he's really good against hand control, obviously. He's always going to have his hand filled. He can still be really explosive. And there's been some really cool builds with him recently using both Unisons and with Successor. So I don't think people should really be sleeping on him. He's still really good. Just not quite... He's just kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. And the meta, we've gotten more cards that deal with him, and just, he's just kind of fallen out of favor in the meta a little bit, but he can still put in work. Gogeta and Gohan, I have both of them down here, are both kind of these red decks that are kind of worse than Yamcha, but they're doing similar things, but I still think they're competitive. Android 21, I used to have up in A tier. She's just not there anymore. The ban hit her really hard, but there's still ways to play her. She's still playable. Yeah, I still play her, and I'll have an updated list for her on the channel for not too long, not too far in the future. And then lastly, we have Yellow Broly. Yellow Broly definitely used to be S tier, and his nerf put him down to A tier. for sure. Like, he definitely was still an A tier, and I could see an argument for him still being A tier. He's still incredibly versatile, and the builds taking advantage of him with the Arrival Broly are really strong, and he can, you know, be played in so many different ways. But, so I had him in A, and then Bandai went ahead and printed, like, 3 insane yellow leaders, Gotenks, Toppo, and Sin Shenron all in a row, and then that kind of made Broly look a little bit worse, because that was kind of his shtick, was being the generic yellow leader. So, yeah, I'll try not to make this video too long, so I feel like I explained all my choices pretty thoroughly. If you have any questions or comments or whatever, just hit us up below. If you think I misplaced someone, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, and or if you think I forgot someone who should be on here, again, let me know. I'd love to hear from you guys. Remember to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.